Phosphor.fans, Earl at thelogbook.com here with a real surprise for you. We are going to cover a couple of games in very short order, very rapid succession, that, frankly, I didn't think any of us would ever get to play. They've been rumored to exist for years. Occasionally someone has posted screenshots off of a TV to prove that they had a prototype of these never-released games. And yet, here we are, finally able to play them. This one, in particular, if you recall my earlier video about the arcade game of the same name, this is one I'm very fond of. It's Kickman for the Atari 2600. It was programmed by Alex Levins, who also did the 2600 versions of Gorf and Crazy Climber, as well as a game called Boing for First Star Software. The most relevant of those, really, I'm going to say, is going to have to be Gorf, because Gorf is another Midway game, like Kickman, and was released in cartridge form for the 2600 by CBS Electronics. So obviously, Alex Levins was on the payroll, was in the good graces of CBS Electronics. He had moved on to a company called Rockland, which did game software for the Atari home computers primarily, when he was working on this game for CBS. And so he kind of had this game going in the skunkworks. The controls on it are really nice. The only real drawback is the sheer number of sprites that you have to properly display Kickman means that everything is kind of flickery. Pop that ghost. But the graphics are nicely drawn, the colors are accurate, and the thing that really surprised me more than anything is Pac-Man's guest appearance is intact in this game. Which may actually be, in a weird sort of way, why it was never released. Because obviously, I think the game is clearly either finished or close to finished. Now, what does Pac-Man have to do with the game never coming out, even though it seems to be close enough to jazz to a finished state? Well, the addition of Pac-Man to the game was originally called Kick, and fairly early on, I think it was determined that, Kick was not pulling in money for arcade operators. And so Midway revised the game to include Pac-Man, and subsequently renamed the game Kickman to kind of reinforce that connection. Midway had the license to produce Pac-Man in the United States, but adding Pac-Man to Kick was Midway taking a bit of a liberty with the specific rights granted them by Namco. So, I don't know how much legal wrangling there was behind the scenes, but Kickman although it was reasonably popular in the arcades, especially once Pac-Man was added to it, and it sort of became, I don't know if you'd call it an unofficial Pac-Man sequel, or let's call it Pac-Man adjacent. Boy, doesn't that sound grand. So the home version, the only home version of this for the longest time, was Commodore's cartridge with the Commodore 64, which we also recently covered. Oh. Oh, Pac-Man doesn't get to eat a ghost today. How sad. Oh, ow. Poor Kickman. So, and as I discussed when I covered the Commodore 64 version of Kickman, if Midway did not have, specific rights granting them permission to use Pac-Man in the arcade game of Kickman, then Commodore probably had even fewer rights to include him in the cartridge, and yet they did. And that might have been a stumbling block for the release of this game as well. I have to say, I really like this better than the Commodore version. It may lack the background cityscape, which Commodore did in very, very simplified form, but it plays more like the arcade game. And the arcade game is a hard thing to replicate because it has that lateral trackball control. It's not a free-floating trackball like you would think of in Centipede or Marble Madness. It's a ball with a stick through it, basically. It's got a dowel through it, and the ball literally only rolls in two directions. Not really a true trackball. Now, I've seen a lot of people on the Atari Age forums talking about trying this out with a trackball controller. I think they're going to be underwhelmed with how it plays with a real trackball, because it is inadvertently going to be sending vertical signals that have nothing to do with the game, that won't do anything to help them play it. Thomas Jensch reportedly had to do quite a bit of work to get this to where it would actually play either in emulation or on a Harmony cart or whatever. And did a really good job. Like I said, it's very flickery, but so were a lot of games in 1982, which incidentally, the ROM file, the ROM that was dumped, was literally dated January 8th, 1982. It's also possible that the workflow of getting stuff licensed and released and approved simply means that CBS Electronics ran out of time to release this as a viable product before the initial signs of the crash set in. Because CBS had made quite a splash they had kind of a master license for Midway's arcade games. They had already done cartridge versions of Wizard of War, Gorf, which I mentioned before, Blueprint, which is actually one of my oldest favorite 2600 games, and Omega Race. So numerous Midway titles that were original to Midway. Oh, sorry, Pac-Man. Farewell, Pac-Man. And as the video game industry, as it was in January of 1982, had started to come apart at the seams by the end of 1982, it probably either this wasn't considered a hot enough title to release immediately and something they would get back to later, or it just never happened. Time ran out for it. Either way, it's a very nice port of Kickman. Really well done if you can overlook the flickeriness of it. And it's just nice to finally have it. It's been rumored to exist for years. It is known that CBS had it on the docket, on the schedule, something they were going to work on. We didn't know until now how close to finished it was, which, it looks like it was very close to finished, as in stopping just short of being burned onto pieces of silicon and put in the box in the stores. So, alas, Kickman never came to see us at home, unless we were Commodore 64 owners, in which case he did. But it's nice to have this really neat port of it. The graphics are very well done, although it almost looks like the Ghost Monsters borrowed straight from Ms. Pac-Man. Who knows? I'm not making an accusation there. It's just, if someone has already done an adequate job of doing that graphic, just do what they do. It doesn't really matter. It never came out. So there you have it, an unreleased gem for the Atari VCS, Kickman. Okay, so here's the thing. I've worked out how you do a home version of Kickman without any legal worries whatsoever. See if you can follow me on this one. It'll make perfect sense. First off, you don't do it on the Commodore 64. You don't do it on the Atari 2600. You do it on the Odyssey 2. And you don't use Pac-Man, you use Casey Munchkin. And you have Casey Munchkin do everything in Kickman that was formerly done by Pac-Man. And even if Atari or Midway say, hey, now, isn't that, you're just like, hey, he's not in a maze. He's not eating dots. Player isn't even controlling him. It's just Casey Munchkin, dude. And that's how you get away with it. See, I've thought of everything. Now we just really need a good Odyssey 2 port of Kickman.